Thanks for tuning in Jin and Tantra. For those of us who like our spirituality with a twist, today we have myself, Daniel, driving the spaceship, if you will. And Eric is off this week, but we are happy to have with a friend of the show, Priscilla Peach Lang. Priscilla, say hello for our
Hi.
audio and visual audience today.
Hello.
Hello. So, as I mentioned in the introduction, we're going to be getting into a small, I guess, piece of a book known as The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. I'll leave the text in the description of the podcast or the video so that you can peruse it for yourself. But, I sometimes read books again, and this particular passage stood out. So I wanted to have a conversation about it because I think it's worth discussing. So the book was written in like 1926 or 23 or something like that. So it's almost 100 years old, but it's still, it's still relevant, I feel like.
It's so good.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah. So I'm going
For
to go ahead and
sure.
read the passage so that this way people have it. And if you're listening to it or watching us and you want to pull it up to have some reference, that's totally cool. But get out your little juice boxes and some pretzels and take a seat. It's not very long, but I'll read it right now, and then we can discuss. And for those listening or watching, you can certainly play along with our game. And it reads, "Then a mason came forth and said, 'Speak to us of houses.' And he, the prophet in this case, answered and said, 'Build of your imaginings a sanctuary in the wilderness before you build a house within the city of walls. For even as you have homecomings in your twilight, so has the wanderer in you, the ever distant and alone. Your house is your larger body. It grows in the sun and sleeps in the stillness of the night, and it is not dreamless. Does your house not dream? And dreaming, leave the city for a grove or hilltop? Would that I could gather your houses into my hand, and like a farmer scatter them into the forest and meadow. Would the valleys were your streets, and the green paths your alleys, and you might seek one another through vineyards, and come with the fragrance of the earth in your garments. But these things are not yet to be. In their fear your forefathers gathered you too near together, and that fear shall endure a little longer. A little longer shall your city walls separate your hearths from your fields. And tell me, O people of this town called Orphalese, what have you in these houses? And what is it that you guard with fastened doors? Have you peace, the quiet urge that reveals your power? Have you remembrances, the glimmering arches that span the summits of the mind? Have you beauty that leads the heart from things fashioned of wood and stone to the holy mountain? Tell me, have you these in your houses? Or have you only comfort, and the lust for comfort, and the stealthy thing that enters a house as a guest, and then becomes a host, and then the master? Aye, it becomes a tamer, and with a hook and scourge makes puppets of your larger desires. Though its hands are silken, its heart is of iron. It lulls you to sleep only to stand by your bed and jeer at the dignity of your flesh. It makes mock of your sound senses and lays them in thistledown like fragile vessels. Verily, the lust for comfort murders the passion of the soul and then walks grinning in the funeral. But you, children of space, you restless in rest, you shall not be trapped nor tamed. Your house shall not be an anchor but a mast. It shall not be a glistening film that covers a wound, but an eyelid that guards the eye. You shall not fold your wings that you may pass through doors, nor bend your heads that they strike not against a ceiling, nor fear to breathe lest walls should crack and fall down. You shall not dwell in tombs made by the dead for the living. Although the magnificence and splendor of your house shall not hold your secrets, nor shelter your longing. For that which is boundless in you abides in the mansion of the sky, whose door is morning mist, and whose windows are the songs and silences of the night." So that is the passage, and that is what we are going to be talking about. So let me Priscilla, let me begin with you, if you don't mind. Give me your, we kind of talked about this maybe a couple of weeks ago about doing it, and so today the sort of opportunity opened up, and I, you had read this book previously, Again, this book is called The Prophet. The author is Khalil Gibran. He's written a number of books, but this probably is his most famous. So when I asked you to do this with me and you read it, what was your initial kind of takeaway from it?
I think, I mean, I've always loved this book because the poeticness, the excerpts and the chapters are very short. But like, this is the one of the chapters that I feel like whenever you read the book, certain chapters will settle with you, you know? So there's one on children, and I reread this book again whenever I had my first child. And so like, I feel like you're always reading it and relating to the chapters. And so whenever you sent it to me, this is a chapter that I've read, but I've never like really sat and thought about, you know? And so I think it's just really beautiful because the people that are asking the questions in the beginning, it's a Mason that's asking basically. And I think one of the most powerful learning and transformative things that we can do is our power of storytelling, which is why the poetry is so beautiful. And so immediately he's connecting to the Mason. He's talking about it seems like he's talking about the brick and the mortar, like the building it.
Mm-hmm.
And as it moves, you can see him slowly transitioning to like alluding to something else. So it's so relatable in the beginning. And that's what I really love about these chapters, is that they're relatable to the person asking the question. And it starts out as a concept, like a real tangible concept. And then it moves so slowly to like this alluding of a more maybe esoteric or ethereal kind of idea or concept. And so I feel like, you and I had talked about what is the house represent, it's like it was thrown out there to the Mason for relatability, I feel like, but it does have this kind of, I've just been thinking about like what I have settled on meaning. And we said maybe imagination, maybe this like childlike spirit, maybe a larger awareness of our consciousness. And so those are kind of my ideas from the beginning.
Okay. Well, if you don't mind, because I don't know if people are going to have this where they can see it, but I kind of wanted to go through piece by piece, and then we'll sort of break it down, right? And see, kind of what comes up as we do it. And then we can maybe at the end do some kind of like larger picture takeaways.
Yeah, for
This way
sure.
people can have, some, for those who are just listening or just watching, you'll get to see, my beautiful face. Hello. All right. So it says, build of your imaginings a sanctuary in the wilderness before you build a house within the city walls. For even as you have homecomings in your twilight, so has the wanderer in you, ever distant and alone. So when I kind of, when I took this, I think it said, at least to me, that people don't prioritize like their natural state, their natural sanctuary, right? They'd rather have a house or a place to reside within the city that's too overcrowded, or too busy, fill in your societal word here, and they'll prioritize that before they even imagine building something somewhere else or residing somewhere else that is a kind of like a more restorative, natural place. Because the actual word in the text is bower, building a bower, and a bower can mean a sanctuary, it can mean a pergola, it can mean a place of refuge. But I just chose the word sanctuary because to me this feels right when I read it this way.
No, I agree. Yeah. I think of even like, when it's talking about building constructs, I even think about like laws or principles or personal truths, so building your laws or principles along the laws of nature, or, and later we can kind of talk later as the thing goes on, but like just this idea of the construct made by man, like, like sometimes as we get older, we grow up in a society with all of these limitations basically, and they're very different from natural law, and we get disconnected from that. And so like if you don't have your foundation built on these like natural principles and truths, you can waver. It can be very easy for you to, you know fall into a path that may not be your own, your own personal path from your inside or something. So
I'm reminded of that statement, there are no straight lines in nature.
yeah.
So we're kind of juxtaposed with like man-made city wall, like specifically walls, right? Because walls are
Yeah.
straight,
Yeah, totally.
right?
And they have boundaries. Yeah, they're boundaries. They contain things. Like containing is always so comfortable for humans because we don't like the unknown, or like, we like to know where our boundaries are. We like to have answers or labels. So totally.
Yeah, this is cool. You know, we talked about doing, you know, just kind of for our listeners, like, so we're doing this now. We haven't done this before. We just kind of talked about doing this. So we're going to
Yeah.
unpack this as it goes. And as it goes, is
Hmm.
going to flower and continue. So whoever's listening, like, we're doing this as an active kind of book club, but like far more microscopic, you know? But I think it's cool. So I'm excited to see kind of where it goes. So I'll just read a little bit further, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
It says, your house is your larger body, period. It grows in the sun and sleeps in the stillness of the night, and it is not dreamless. Does your house not dream? And dreaming, leave the city for a grove or hilltop. I'll let you start.
Oh man, for me when I read this, I I feel like this is where I was really relating to this idea of like our consciousness and awareness. So like we, you
Mm,
know, when we think of dreaming or imagining things, like I think that like everybody has dreams of grandeur. You know, we fantasize and we dream about things better and bigger. And that like as we live in the day and as we experience the day and we experience what other people have and what, you know, advertisements and marketing in this world that we have to walk in, you know, it is a living, growing thing of input and how it can like shape and change our perception and how we see the world, and it can affect our desires. And so that's kind of like what I was like feeling from it.
so, you know, what's interesting is that like I'm observing my own mind operate right now. So I'm wanting to look at this entire passage, the whole thing, from not just these two paragraphs, but the whole thing, and try and find a theme, try and find the one thing that he's talking about to tie it up, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But doing this with that mindset actually is making it more difficult for me, because I actually don't think that, now that I'm thinking live, I'm thinking and talking out loud live. Well, wonderful.
Spontaneity at its
Everyone,
finest.
everyone's always doing it, by the way. So I'm not special, but I will say, but not everybody records it and shares it with other people. So that's a little unique, slightly. There's only like, Priscilla, there's only like 3 million podcasts. I'm so unique. Give me a break, you know? Anyway, we're in the
This
top
is the
10%, by the
one.
way. We're in the top 10%. Okay.
Okay.
Of the worldwide 3 million.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
anyways, but I actually, so it says the house is your larger body, which to me is like such an interesting statement, right? So I thought of this a little bit more physically, like in like an actual home, you know, and like I'm thinking
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
well, you know, if everything is alive, right, or has some amount of like connectivity to other things, I guess that's what I mean when I say everything is alive. Not
Yeah,
necessarily
yeah.
like this wall is going to talk to me, but that like everything is connected in terms of where it came from, where it's going, what it's going to be a part of, you know, the sort of not anthropomorphization that I would give to a wall that would talk, but the fact that like it helps to contain my awareness and separate, you know, whatever, so that it's part of a consciousness itself, right? Somebody created
Yeah, of
it from
course.
nothing.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
like this thing has its own kind of desires. It has its own. So dreaming is sort of like a kind of aspect of visualization, you know, that like
Yeah.
does the home does do things that we would consider inanimate, right, do they not dream as well? Are they not a larger extension of us, so that if we're alive and we mark our aliveness, or part of which, and we mark our aliveness is through dreaming, is through the ability to kind of come and go, come and return, you know, or go and return, I guess I could say, that wouldn't the things that we share sort of space with do the same thing or have the same ability? That's kind of how I sort of read this part.
Yeah, I mean, and it's like I said, it's still at the very beginning of the passage or the chapter. So
Yeah,
like I do think that it's like, you know, still very much leaning towards the more physical, like this physical
yeah, home.
non like
Yeah,
yeah, like non-living like structural thing totally.
yes,
And so yeah, and I think like as you if you get to the end of the passage and you go back, you can interpret it differently, but for
yeah.
sure I think that the relatability is still being nailed home of like these things of like, you know, totally.
Yeah. So the next part here, I'll say, would I, or would that I could gather your houses into my hand, and like a farmer, scatter them into the forest and meadow. Would the valleys were your streets, or would the valleys be your streets, and the green paths be your alleys? That you might seek one another through vineyards, and come with the fragrance of the earth in your garments. So I'll start, and then you know you can go. So would I could gather your houses into my hand, and you know, like a farmer, scatter them into the forest and meadow. To me, I took this, not, this is kind of where it started to change for me, right? Because he's using a metaphorical, like, if I could take your homes into my hand, I guess I could maybe say these are more like, for me anyways, these felt like the beginnings of like one's intention or desires or hopes or dreams, or things that we would say, you know, like we could plant the seed and it would grow.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say for sure. Like he's
Yeah.
collecting the houses in his hand, so for sure, like this idea of like an imagination or like these deep, deep levels of subconsciousness that like
Yes.
that's where the houses are, like these deeper layers, and gathering them to throw them and plant something to grow something new, for sure.
And he's
And
also kind
it's
of,
like,
go ahead,
go
sorry.
ahead. No,
No, you go
please
ahead.
go.
But it also builds on what he just said previously. Do your houses not dream as you do? You know what I'm saying? So he's kind of collecting this kind of thing and moving it forward to the
Yeah,
next
yeah,
one,
yeah.
you know?
It's like the first part of that tying into like the second half. Like we're starting to slowly move. There's like little ties starting to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it said, you know, would the valleys be your streets, the green paths be your alleys, that you might seek one another through vineyards and come with the fragrance of the earth in your garments? It's just like saying, instead of moving through cityscapes, you know, that you would be, you know, living in a more natural accordance, not accordance, but you would be living in a more natural kind of place. And that when you would go to one place or another, you would smell like the outside, not necessarily smell like you know, a piss-filled alley. Mm.
And I think it also alludes to the fact that like these it's the same place. He's talking about the same place but seeing it differently.
Yeah.
He's, you know what I'm saying? And so this idea that like I think we've talked in the past a lot of times about like our own value systems of like sometimes you don't have to change your job or like your partner or like your way that you're doing anything. You just have to change the way you see it, like your
Hmm.
perception of it. You can keep everything exactly the same. You don't have to like sell your house and make this huge transformation. It just can happen in the mind. It's your relationship, how you're interacting with it, and your true your true effort and emotion and participation in it. So
But sometimes you do have to change.
absolutely, no, absolutely, I agree. I'm not disagreeing with you there, but yeah, because like something, like some things are unhealthy, you have to just
Yeah.
like kind
Yeah.
of give that up.
Strike it
No, for
down.
sure, I'm not saying you can, it's all in the head, but like
Yeah.
I'm just saying it's also like this passage I think is really saying that like, if I challenged you, could you change
Sure.
your ideas about this and make it this? And would it bring you more peace? Or there might be some, like if you overcome the fear of seeing it one way, would there be some reward or gain? So anyway.
The next part, it says, in their fear, your forefathers gathered you too near, and that fear shall endure a little longer. A little longer shall your city walls separate your hearths from your fields. I quite, this to me, this is kind of like the movement from like, I don't know, there's this passage and one later on. I quite like it because it speaks a little bit to like ancestry first, you know, but then second, it says that like we're fear-driven creatures. Actually, we're
Yeah.
survival-based creatures, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and that like it's the city walls separate your hearths from the fields, meaning like the openness and the expansiveness of nature. You
Yeah.
are separated from that by the walls that were built from the people who were scared of
Yeah.
being
Yeah, yeah.
engaged previously, you know?
Totally. And yeah, like that's like those laws or those things are created by a man. We were talking before about like nature law versus like man-made law. And I think as humans, like we do, fear is like a driving force in a lot of things.
Mhm.
So
It's a
totally.
survival mechanism. You know, I'm not going to
No,
like say, oh
totally.
God,
Yeah.
you know, whatever, don't have fear, but it's like it's one emotion of
Well,
many.
and like in older days, I think in more primal days, it was a necessity to like basically like throw the body into a response situation. And
Hmm.
so, I mean, it is a survival mechanism, like biologically too.
Hmm.
So
Hmm. Yeah, I feel like here he's talking like really trying to get at separation, you
yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah.
the
Yeah, separate from
separation.
the whole. I mean, even
Yes.
Chinese medicine, like the whole is better. That's why we diagnose the body as a whole,
Yes.
because the whole is the like once you start separating things, it's no bueno.
Yeah. Yeah. Then he asked the people of the town, what have you in these houses? What is it that you guard with fastened doors? Um, Have you peace, the quiet urge that reveals your power? Have you remembrances, the glimmering arches that span the summits of the mind? Have you beauty that leads the heart from things fashioned of wood and stone to the holy mountain? So we'll go through this in the next part, because the next part has its own kind of piece to it, right? So have you peace? Have you remembrances? Have you beauty? I think this, to me, this the most interesting of these was the one that says, have you peace, the quiet urge that reveals your power, right? So like that, what they're saying is that like a powerful mind, or a powerful being is one that has peace, one that knows peace, right? Not necessarily meaning that one who has been pacified, but one who is peaceful, and I feel like, especially, as people see more people on, I'm going to call it television, but I'm just going to say on a screen, meaning the 2D version of an actual being, without ever getting to sense the true essence of a person, because that can only be sensed by being around them. You have to feel their energy, that we get these kind of false ideas of bravado, whether it be from, politicians or people selling something, or fake gurus, or whatever.
Instagram posts, with filters and
everything.
all
Yeah,
kind
even
of
just
everything,
regular. Yeah, it's all of it, but
totally.
people want to be leaders in some situations, and of course some situations need leaders. That's fine. But not everybody's good at everything, and not everybody's super tough, and not everybody has all the answers. It's not clean. It is not clean. There are not, the city walls don't exist in the forest for a reason, and so I just thought that was just an interesting statement on, like, because it's rare that people talk about power, because normally we're talking about power in a negative fashion. Oh, the power dynamic is off. This person has more inherent power than that one. The system is exerting its power on more unfortunate. And most of those things I totally agree with, but I'm not talking about systemic power. I'm talking about individual, sensation of being empowered, comes from, at least according to Khalil Gibran in this passage here, comes from a sense of peace, which I just find to be like quite a profound statement, actually.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I took this statement as like also just the material things, like an actual house, like locking doors to protect actual things, material things. And I think what I have to say actually will wait for a couple passages, but I think there is something to say about like peace and like a deep sort of contentment. So like whenever you have a deep source of contentment, your whole or your cup is filled. And only then can you give to other people. You can only show up for other people when you are full yourself, I feel like. And so there's there's something like that piece is like, there's something that whenever you feel it, you all of a sudden your value system changes. I think, I had a personal experience in my life where it was dealing with money, and there was like a lot of bitterness, and I felt like so scattered and energetic. And the minute I like changed my mind about it, and then had forgiveness, there was like this overwhelming like lesson that I feel like I learned. I still carry it with me today, and so those types of things, I think, like that peace that I felt after, it was so profound. Like I can never forget it. It is, it's affected me since it happened. And that was like, I mean, my God, like 15, so like almost probably it's a long time ago. I'm not going to age myself on a podcast. I'm not that old, but still. And next,
moving on.
Moving on.
And so it says, "Oh, tell me, what do you have in these houses? Or have you only comfort and the lust for comfort? That stealthy thing that enters a house as a guest, then becomes a host, and then a master. And then it becomes a tamer with a hook and scourge, and makes puppets of your larger desires. Though its hands are silken, its heart is of iron. It lulls you to sleep, only to stand by your bed and jeer at the dignity of your flesh. It makes mock or makes fun of your sound senses, and lays them in the thistledown like fragile vessels." And thistledown is like small flower particles that float in the wind.
Yeah.
Only the lust for comfort, or it says it murders the lust for comfort, and the passion of this murders the lust for comfort and the passion of the soul, and then walks grinning in the funeral.
At the funeral, yeah.
So this part is probably My
I'm about to go off the rails.
so
You
let me
go
start,
first.
and let me. So this part is such a, I think it's so fitting for right now, so fitting for right now, especially, after everybody has, who's listening to this, survived the pandemic, and not just the, COVID and whatever, but all of the sort of mental strains that were put on everybody, and the, like, even though we were home, people were buying, who could afford to, were buying so much more, like the focus on the home grew exponentially, which then had ripple effects in the housing market and everything else, right? But that, like, it increased the level of, like, home focused, comfort focused, right? Like, creating a sort of sanctuary, which, yes, people who are listening will say, but Daniel, didn't you say to create a sanctuary? And I would say, yes, but not separate from others, not separate from this, from the city, not separate from other people. But that, like, actually this comfort that comes in is a stealthy thing that enters as a guest and becomes a host and then a master. And I love this. It says, its hands are silken, but its heart is of iron. The lust for comfort murders the passion of the soul, then walks grinning into the funeral. Because really and truly, for me, like, there is appropriate time, like in Chinese medicine, there's activity and then there's rest, and you need a balance of both. Everything is always about striking the balance. But this desire for comfort, the desire for ease, the desire for convenience, we sell our souls for this, in terms of giving up our information to companies, having Amazon one-click purchasing, things that need to be delivered like 2 minutes right now, Instacart, Grubhub, Uber Eats, all, like, everything. And it's just for me anyways, is disempowering us consistently. And when people get consistently more disempowered, they end up they end up staying secluded, and probably more to the point of this thing, they stay more isolated, actually. And so, even though it's certainly nice to be comfortable, who doesn't like that? I like that. I'm sitting in a comfortable chair right now. My clothes are comfortable. Like, we don't want to be suffering, for sure. Right? We want to avoid suffering. I get it. Yeah, I understand. And I'm, not pro injury. I'm not pro suffering. But there is a level to which that we're trying to I just feel like society is really trying to cultivate this idea of, like, no suffering, right? No hardship, no discomfort. But this is a fallacy, actually, and the search for it, and the acquisition of things to implement so much comfort only does really only softens it slackens the soul, in a sense, And so I just love it. It says its hands are silken, but its heart is made of iron, because comfort only knows one thing: it's to sink. Really is to sink. After you're free and easy, without the, the I guess I could say the doldrums of the day, that when it's all finished, and you're in your nice place, like, I don't know. There's we could talk about this for like probably 10 years, but I want to hear what you say. So that this is my part. I just wanted to
I
say
love
again
it.
at the end, the lust for comfort murders the passion of the soul, and then walks grinning in at the funeral. Savage. Just savage,
Savage. I'm savage though. Like, when you say you're like not pro suffering, I'm pro suffering. I don't think you'll I I don't think you could ever find someone that's had true transformation that will tell you like they did it walking in sunshine. And I feel like that's unfortunately, I don't think, I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to happen, but I think really I mean, it's what do they say? It's the pressure that makes the diamond. Like, you don't get a diamond by just throwing some carbon in like a cup and just letting it, I mean, you could wait a million years. It's the pressure. And the beauty that comes from that is, like, for me, that's where it's always been. And so, like, whenever it was talking about like the comfort and how it sneaks into your home as a guest, I think that's so relevant today, because whenever this passage said comfort, in my head, it was like really referring to like instant gratification and the ease of things, like
ease,
getting
yeah.
things when you didn't work for them. And whenever I say I'm going off the rails, I don't mean off the rails, but like it really brought to my mind some of the studies that I have read. I think about the brain a lot, like chemically and neurologically, because
Yeah.
my daughter had a stroke. So I love reading about I have like firm belief in the neuroplasticity of the brain and its ability. But I think when it says comfort sneaks in as a guest, it's talking about like whenever, I mean, when we're instantly gratified, there's papers and research papers talking about like the dopamine dump that
Yeah.
happens, and like the instability of it, because dopamine works with serotonin, it works with oxytocin, it works with endorphins, and there has to
Mhm.
be this like beautiful balance of it, and there's something to say about working and going through things, whether it's, sometimes it's just work, it doesn't have to be
Right.
suffering necessarily, but actually putting something in to get the reward, you know and it feels good. Like the first time you do it, it feels good, and then you're just constantly craving. So when it talked about comfort sneaking in as a guest, like, it starts to shift your brain, like how you crave and want things, and it's such a tiny veer. It's such a small percentage of an angular change that all of a sudden, like down the road, you're so far off your path, like, you're so far off your, what did you say? Like your fire, you said something of the, something to the passion or something in that
Oh,
excerpt or whatever,
it says the lust for comfort murders the passion of the soul.
murders the passion of the soul. So like all of a sudden I mean, it, yeah, savage wise, like you just wait and give it long enough, and like all of a sudden you don't even know where your innermost path is,
Hmm.
that's what I kind of got from it. And like, I mean, such a slow shift. It's a slippery slope, and that's why I think like that's smiling at your funeral. I was like, man, like the joke's on you. Like it truly is at the end, and that's why I like that little bit of humor right there, that little reference to it smiling. I was like, oh man, like that's a hard pill to swallow.
I think
Um,
I think maybe more for our modern purposes, a better word I would use would be convenience.
yeah, totally.
Convenience, because comfort
Yeah,
is just like you could think, oh well, I don't want to feel pain. But like
yeah,
convenience is specific, a little bit more specific. Like let's make everything easy. Oh, it's just easy. Let's buy things
yeah.
that are already chopped up. It's easy.
Dude, I
Let's,
know.
you know what I'm saying? Like,
I was reading about this thing. It was like just think, like in our lifetime, like remember when you had to go to the store, you actually had to drive to a store, you had to buy a roll of film, then you had to figure out how to put the film in your weird camera without screwing up the first three pictures, and then after you took your pictures, you had to drive back and have someone develop, you had to wait for like a week, and then you had to pay for it to see your pictures, and half of them were blurry and most of them had red blown out eyes, and you're like, what? Like
yeah,
that's
you
so
were
mind
lucky
blowing.
if you got like one or two good ones. You're like, oh,
Totally.
straight, we did good.
Totally. We did so good. And it's like, now people like just distort reality with showing their best pictures and the filters. And it's so instant, oh, delete that one. Oh, this is a good one. Change this. So it is, I mean, that has an effect on us. Like, if you don't think that's affecting your mind and your brain and the way things are happening in your body, like, I mean, that's why this
Oh yeah,
passage, even written in like the 1920s, is still so relevant for today. Like, even more so today with
more
like
so, yeah,
the how convenient life
because
is for us.
that was like the
Totally.
beginning. That was the beginning of the way.
Yeah. Totally.
That was the
Yeah.
beginning. That's like when I started to have a car. Somebody on the block had a car.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
didn't take 3 days by horseback. You know what I'm
He
saying?
saw it
Like,
coming.
yeah, those
Like,
lazy,
hindsight's 2020. Like that's
always,
real hard
always.
right now. Like,
All right, let's continue here. But
mhm.
it says, "But you, children of space, you restless in rest, you shall not be trapped nor tamed. Your house shall not be an anchor, but a mast. Um, it shall not be a glistening film that covers a wound, but an eyelid that guards the eye. You shall not fold your wings that you may pass through doors, nor bend your heads that they strike against the ceiling, nor fear to breathe lest the walls should crack and fall down." I just, this part in particular to me is like, now he's speaking to a particular part of the crowd that's listening. I don't want to call them the awakened ones, but we'll call them the restless ones, you know, and that like the,
When they get comfortable in their convenience and they're still feeling like, oh, this something's not right
yeah.
here. Like they're aware. They're aware of something.
And actually that's an important point because, as practitioners, right? Like, and I'm practicing more than you are currently, but we have friends and people who are listening. Some of us are, practitioners of various, medicines or various practices, whatnot, or just have family members, friends, so on and so forth. But like I'm not going to say a real, but another kind of pandemic is anxiety, the feeling of
Mhm.
being overwhelmed or
Mhm.
not good enough or figure, put whatever you want, but this anxiousness and to me, like this has a sense of like this restlessness, difficulty sleeping, difficulty concentrating, difficulty sitting down to do meditation or tasks, right?
Yeah, but he's talking about the restless and rest. When you said he's addressing the more awake ones, like I think that's a different restlessness, like the anxiousness for people is, I think their inner paths being so abandoned that the restlessness they feel is like that little poking, like, hey,
Well, right.
um,
That's what I'm saying.
yeah,
That's what
yeah,
I'm saying. But having seen it,
mm-hmm,
a bit more professionally, there are layers. It's layers to it,
for sure, for
And but
sure,
I will say that like it can be a signal from the body also,
yeah,
of some kind of discomfort or some sequela of a previous event.
totally,
You know what I'm saying? And like this is sort of like that the response to an event or some fear or some, everybody has a different experience, but it is a it is kind of like an indication that sort of binging to say that like things are not right.
mm-hmm,
Either things are not right externally that are there that are reflecting on my internal status, or things are not right on my internal status and I am reflecting in this way, and to people outwardly. Do you know what I'm saying? But either way, that there's some desire to be ameliorated. There's something that the body, that the mind, that the heart, that the soul, whatever, is trying to communicate, you know? And I
yeah.
think that like for some people, they take this not as an anchor but as a mast, you know? And they take it as a glistening film that covers the eye and not an eyelid, you
Well,
know?
you said, I mean, you yourself said comfort sinks. Like that's why I think they used
Yes,
iron. Like this idea that like, the spirit wants to be free. Like it
of
wants to
course.
reflect nature. Like our
Yeah.
true inner fire wants to be a reflection of nature. So, yeah, like this sinking anchor versus a mast is to be able to move. It's so that you can catch the wind to move.
Yeah.
It is that freedom of movement. So,
Yeah. No, I mean that's what I'm saying. And then, to I think the next part I quite like, you should not fold your wings that you may pass through doors. You should not bend your head so you don't, crack your head in the ceiling, and you should not fear to breathe so that the walls would crack around you and fall down. Meaning that like at some point you have this openness, to be yourself, right? To
well,
express fully, and
I
not.
feel like I feel like you like this part because you like the fire analogy with like the people behind the rocks and like the little hand
Oh,
shadows.
the allegory of the cave.
Yeah, so it's like this idea that like if you have been told that you're this way and you've given these like this house has been built for you by someone else, like it is the same concept, but like to know your own ability and to know that those actually don't exist, that you know you can expand your wings and you can stand tall, and those are just imaginary walls and things put there by fear from other people that built these houses, is really powerful,
It's also kind of like a metaphor for like an eggshell and the metamorphosis that's occurring on the inside, and we're all going through this, but that the house is
Yeah,
kind of like this shell. And if you consider the house to be culturally implied things that you should be doing as a man, as a woman, as a student, as a wife, as a whatever,
yeah,
that like eventually you can, feel like you want to sort of sink away from it, and just make it easy, make everything
hmm,
very easy. But then there are going to be some, as like he called it, the children of space, the restless and rest. And I kind of akin that to some kind of like anxious feeling sometimes some people have, that like they use this then as fodder for their growth,
yeah,
as
yeah,
logs for the fire. And
yeah,
that they
yeah,
don't fold their wings so that they have to pass through the doors. They let,
hmm,
they allow themselves to shine. They
yeah.
allow
they're
themselves to kind of come out and
they're
be.
gonna they're gonna not be scared of like what's outside the eggshell. They're gonna take the risk to like say like maybe I'll learn something, maybe I'll grow, like if
Mm-hmm.
I take the risk of going into the unknown, like what is out there,
Mm-hmm.
what if,
Yeah, be unabashedly yourself.
yeah,
Yeah. No, there's yeah, I always have like some kind of like I don't even know how to say it, like admiration for like
Uh-huh.
some people who like dress super duper flamboyant, like super flamboyant. You know what I'm saying? And this is
Yeah,
from, like people who dress in drag, or
totally.
like
Yeah. No,
some
me too.
other,
I'm right there.
you know what I'm saying? Or like some other people who like when they
For
wear
sure.
like women will do this a little bit more than men, but some cultures, some men will dress just like to the nines, like orange, like champagne colored suits and like all kinds of hats. You know what I'm saying? Like I just like that's kind of cool. Like I like to dress, don't get me wrong, but like that's like next level. Like you're out,
Yeah.
you're like out, you know? Like
Yeah.
I quite like that.
I
So
like that too.
to me, this is like, okay, I'm going to show what's on the inside, on the outside, and I'm not going to tame myself, to
Totally.
fit in because I'm worried about, what the things might come. We're going to
That's
move on just so we can
so
kind of
primal of you, Daniel.
how it is.
So natural.
And this
Just
other part I quite like. I love all of it. So whatever. It says, "You shall not dwell in tombs made by the dead for the living. And although the magnificence and splendor, your house shall not hold your secret nor your longing. For that which is boundless in you abides in the mansion of the sky, whose door is morning mist and whose windows are the songs and silences of the night." So I love that line. You shall not dwell in tombs made by the dead for the living. Like I just because we didn't build our home. It's
hmm
just
hmm
not like and so even in 1920, people they weren't building as many homes. I mean, they still were. I mean, obviously tons of homes have been built, but people were buying homes
Yeah.
that were already made. Whereas I don't know how much longer, but they were building their own homes. So things were already kind of, being purchased and made for them. But that like it says, your house shall not hold your secret nor shelter your longing. So we're talking, for me, it feels like more lifelong kind of desires. These are larger aspirations of the soul, right? And then
Oh
it it
yeah.
it firms my belief in that when it says, "For that which is boundless in you abides in the mansion of the sky, whose door is the morning mist, and whose windows are the songs and silences of the night," referring to this kind of like idea of being in nature. And now, as I'm reading this to me feels like the journey of one's life,
Yeah.
and that you
Well,
start as like a younger person, you know, looking for your identity, trying to fit in, you know, and then as
yeah.
you're trying to go through and, cross between being in natural or, being synthetic or being natural, like you have the fear of your parents,
hmm
of what you should be or shouldn't do or shouldn't do, and then as you have all of that, like you're trying to make your way through life and then it becomes difficult. And so part of you wants to go one way, the other part wants to go the other way, but you take the easier route, you try the
hmm
convenience route, but yet still something inside you is restless,
hmm
and that boundless nature starts to kind of pop up, and then you embrace it and you allow it to come forth like a butterfly out of a cocoon, and now at the end you're kind of like opening up to your magnificence and splendor, as like the essence, your spirit begins to kind of shine as you make the connection between yourself and nature around you.
Yeah.
That's me think.
No, that's good. I love that. That's different. Like, I love hearing what you think, because like me, I kind of like when it got to that part, it was actually the last paragraph. There was something in it talking about like a glimmering something covering a wound, and that, or an eyelid guarding an
Yeah,
eye. So
yeah,
at that point, I kind of like, I think just my yoga and my like, just like my thinking of like almost like the chakra system of this like kind of escalating through like primal
ah,
fear and moving. And so I was thinking like that's so superficial to refer to a glimmering like bandage over a wound, because this idea that like if you try to get somewhere superficially and it's not real, it is just going to be a wound. It's going to be a weeping wound that's never going to be healed. Or this idea of, I thought it was interesting to use this idea of an eyelid guarding an eye, because like your third eye and your like vision center, but like a a higher connection. And that the idea that you do need an eyelid, like you need to guard what comes in and out, because it is, the comfort is such a slippery slope to pull you right back down, sink you right back to that fear and those like those restrictive things. And so this idea of like, in the end, when it was like, this house isn't just yours, it's going to be like in the sky, this idea of almost opening up your crown chakra in a sense and being like connected, and that idea of that connectivity of nature. And that's how nature works. It functions as a whole. There's death and life happening simultaneously. There's a natural movement in things. There's a spontaneity, there's disaster, there's and so that's kind of where my brain went with it, essentially. This kind of like waking up, slowly waking up, moving from fear and kind of moving, and then like like you just took it from like, like when you start young in the world, like, I mean, I've had two kids, and whenever like babies are born, their eyes have this interesting, like, they're just like, you can tell they're not here yet. And then I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, and like just seeing them like wake up, like just wake up in general, like normal life, like start like understanding and questioning, and like you see this like awakening of consciousness. And I think once we hit like puberty or get older, people think like, oh, you're here. But I think it is a process. We're born and we're searching for our own selves. We're searching for an identity. We're taking in information. And like at some point, you have to take responsibility and realize that what we take in affects us and how we do things. And there has to be, or I don't think there has to be. I think for some people, it's not enough. They want to know, they feel like this digging at them. And so they go on this explorative journey, which is where I'm like suffering.
But that's
like if you want to do the work, but that's totally me. That's personal.
No, but
Anyway, that's kind of like,
well, we've talked about that before, like Joseph Campbell, the Dark Night of the Soul, the hero with 1,000 faces, that this sort of this archetypal journey that people go through, in terms of like discovering their true selves. But through there's always trials and tribulations in any hero's journey, like that's a part of the story. If it just was, it wouldn't be a journey if like the guy or the gal or whatever, woke up and was like, all right, I'm gonna go fix this problem, and then went and did it. I was like, cool. Now, like like that's not really great for storytelling.
All right, well after what I said, wrap it up for us so we can be.
Well, I think the beauty about this is that like people can have their own kind of takeaways from it, as it is with anything. But I think the larger point here was to kind of have a interesting discussion, that touched around a number of different topics, something that was written so long ago, yet is still so utterly relevant, because society, even though it's changed, also hasn't changed. There's pressures, there is kind of like tendencies and habits and momentum that push us towards a certain ways of being. Now, whether that's coming from us and extending outward, the desire for convenience, or whether that's sort of imprinted upon us by the overlords or the structures that be. I can't say, but I can say for sure that like this has been noticed and has been written about for at least 100 years.
Yeah,
but probably longer.
For sure.
And
for sure.
It sort of re-strengthens or recapitulates the tenor of this show, the tenor of this work, which is to question things and not accept them at face value, to look beyond them, ask for the intention, to find the intention, behind it, because it's not what you do, it's how you do it. And so even though we're discussing what are we doing, we're talking about a passage in the book, but how are we doing it is coming at it from authentic places, sharing our beliefs and how that works with us, listening to what you say, having my opinion maybe not necessarily changed, but at least influenced by what you think, and taking that as a consideration to be possible, and then vice versa. That kind of dialogue, this kind of thought process, to me is far more in line with building bridges than it is with breaking them.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And that's kind of like one of the passions for what we do here, and introducing people to things that I think is cool is also the other ones.
Totally.
And having good people on to chat and share with is very nice. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
And we wanted to say just thank you to everybody for tuning in, whether you're listening to us on whatever your favorite podcast app is. Like half our audience comes from Apple Podcasts. So if you are listening to us on Apple Podcasts, I would certainly love it if you would left a positive review. It helps the show grow, guaranteed. It's instantaneous. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you know, all the things, right? Like, comment, subscribe, share with people, spam people, even if you want, you know, like whatever, it's fine. You know, give it to them. Hey, check this out. You know, it's all good. You know, as always, we thank everybody for listening, everybody for watching, for tuning in, however you consume us. If you would like to, you know, give us some feedback or some ideas and things to cover, please hit us up at ginandtantra@gmail.com. You can find us on Instagram at Gin and Tantra, the Facebook page, Gin and Tantra Podcast. Yeah. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
For Priscilla, this is Daniel. We'll catch y'all on the next one.
Sounds good. Bye-bye.
Peace.